So the story goes like this. Everything is perfect. Then a woman, a man, a snake, and a piece of fruit show up. The woman eats the fruit. The man eats the fruit. And just like that, everything is ruined. Paradise is lost. Death enters the world, all because of one bite. It sounds a bit much, doesn't it? A little ridiculous even. Did one snack really cause all the suffering, all the pain, all the problems we see in the world today? It's a fair question. On the surface, it seems like an extreme overreaction. A cosmic punishment that doesn't fit the crime. To get to the bottom of it, you have to look past the fruit. The story isn't really about a piece of fruit. It was never about the fruit. It was about what that fruit represented. It was about a choice, and that choice had to do with one simple fundamental thing: trust. Let's back up. Before the bite, before the snake, what was the situation? The Bible paints a picture of a place called Eden. It's described as a garden, but it's more than just a nice park. It was a world of perfect harmony. The relationship between the first humans, Adam and Eve, and their creator was direct or unfiltered. There was no shame, no fear, no guilt. They walked with God, they talked with him. Imagine that kind of relationship. No need for prayer in the way we think of it. No wondering if he's listening, he's just there. It was a state of complete dependence and complete provision. Everything they needed was given to them. Their purpose was clear: take care of this garden, this world, in partnership with the one who made it. In this perfect world, there was only one rule. Just one. God points out all the trees in the garden. He says you can eat from any of them. Enjoy it all. It's all yours. But there's this one tree in the middle of the garden, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. Don't eat from that one. The day you eat from it, you will surely die. That's it. That's the entire list of regulations. It seems simple enough, but why this rule? Why a tree? Why the knowledge of good and evil? It wasn't an arbitrary test, like a trick question on an exam. The command was the entire framework for their relationship with God. It was the line that defined reality. On one side of the line was trust. On the other side was distrust. By giving them this choice, God was giving them real freedom. A robot that is programmed to obey isn't really loving. Love requires a choice. For Adam and Eve's relationship with God to be real, they had to have the ability to choose against. The tree was that choice, embodied. It was a physical representation of a boundary. God was essentially saying, trust me. Trust that I am good. Trust that my way is the best way for you. I will define for you what is good. I will provide for you what is good. You don't need to carry that burden. The tree of the knowledge of good and evil represented the option to take that burden for themselves, to be their own gods, to decide for themselves what is right and what is wrong. The warning attached was stark. You will surely die. This wasn't just a threat. It was a statement of fact, a description of cause and effect. God is the source of life. To disconnect from the source of life is to experience death. It's like unplugging a lamp from the wall socket. The lamp doesn't get punished by the power company. It simply stops working because it has been separated from its source of power. God was telling them, if you choose to separate yourselves from me, the source of life, the result will be death. It's the natural consequence. So the stage is set. A perfect world, a perfect relationship, one rule that defines that relationship, and a choice. Then the serpent shows up. The Bible presents the serpent not just as a talking animal, but as a cunning and malevolent creature. Later in the Bible, this figure is identified with Satan, an adversary of God. The serpent doesn't go to Adam, it goes to Eve, and its strategy is brilliant in its subtlety. It doesn't start with a command, eat the fruit. It starts with a question, a small seed of doubt. Did God really say, you must not eat from any tree in the garden? Notice the twist. That's not what God said. He said they could eat from every tree but one. The serpent's question is designed to make God sound restrictive, unreasonable, stingy. It's a caricature of God's character. It paints God as a cosmic killjoy who makes beautiful gardens and then puts up do not touch signs everywhere. Here's Eve corrects him. She says, no, we can eat from the trees. It's just the one in the middle we can't eat from, or even touch, or we will die. She even adds the part about not touching it, maybe showing that the rule was already becoming a bit of a burden in her mind. But she still knows the deal. This is where the serpent goes for the kill. It launches a direct three-pronged attack on God's character and their reality. First, a direct contradiction of God's word. You will not surely die. Just a flat-out denial. Who are you going to believe? Me or him? He's lying to you. Second, an accusation against God's motive. For God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened. The serpent is planting a new idea God is holding out on you. He has this amazing thing, this enlightenment, this higher level of existence, and he's keeping it from you. He's not a generous provider. He's an insecure tyrant afraid of you becoming his equal. Third, a promise of godhood. And you will be like God, knowing good and evil. This is the ultimate temptation. You don't have to live independence. You don't have to trust someone else to tell you what's right. You can have that power for yourself. You can be the center of your own universe. You can be autonomous. You can be God. Think about how powerful that temptation is. It's the root of so many of our own struggles. The desire to be in control. The suspicion that God is holding out on us. The belief that we know better. The serpent didn't use force. It used ideas. It attacked the very foundation of their existence, the goodness and trustworthiness of their creator. And it worked. The story says that Eve looked at the fruit. She saw that it was good for food. That makes sense. She was a human. But then two other things are mentioned. It was a delight to the eyes, and it was desirable to make one wise. She was no longer just seeing a piece of fruit on a tree God told her not to eat. She was seeing a path to power, a way to get something she thought God was withholding. The serpent's words had reframed reality for her. Trusting God was gone. In its place was suspicion, and a desire for self-advancement. So she took a bite. It wasn't just a snack. It was a declaration of independence. It was a vote of no confidence in God. It was an act of rebellion that said, "My will, not yours. I will be the one to decide what is good for me." Then she gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. This is a crucial detail. Adam wasn't off somewhere else. He was right there. He likely heard the whole conversation with the serpent. He wasn't deceived in the same way Eve was. He was the one who had received the command directly from God in the first place. He saw his wife eat it, he saw she didn't drop dead on the spot, and he made a choice. He chose his wife, his own desires, over his relationship with his creator. He followed her into rebellion. So, what happened? Did lightning strike? Did the ground open up? Not immediately. The text says something much more subtle and profound. Then the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked. Wait, they were naked the whole time. What changed? Before, their nakedness was a sign of their innocence. There was no shame, no self-consciousness, no reason to hide. But now, with this new knowledge of good and evil, the first thing they knew was that something was wrong with them. They experienced shame, guilt, self-awareness in the most negative sense. Their first act as newly enlightened beings was not to build a city or write a poem. It was to sew fig leaves together to cover themselves, to hide, not just from God, but from each other. The perfect, open, shameless intimacy between man and woman was broken. Now there was awkwardness and fear. The next thing that happened is just as telling. They heard the sound of God walking in the garden in the cool of the day. Before, this would have been a moment of joy, a time to connect. But now, they ran. They hid among the trees. The Creator comes to be with his creation, and his creation hides from him in fear. The perfect, open relationship between humanity and God was shattered. Fear replaced fellowship. God calls out, "Where are you?" This isn't because God is playing hide and seek. The all-knowing Creator of the universe knew exactly where they were physically. This was a relational question. It was an invitation to confess. It was a chance to come clean. Where are you? What has happened to our relationship? Why are you hiding? Adam's response is a masterclass in blame shifting. He says, "I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Then God asks the obvious follow-up. "Who told you that you were naked? Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Here was Adam's chance. He could have said, "Yes, I did. I messed up. I'm sorry." But he doesn't. Instead, he says, "The woman you put here with me, she gave me some fruit from the tree, and I ate it." He blames Eve, and in a subtle way, he even blames God. "This woman you gave me, it's her fault." He refuses to take responsibility for his own choice. So God turns to Eve. "What is this you have done?" For her chance, and she does the same thing. "The serpent deceived me, and I ate." She blames the serpent. No one is willing to own their decision. The harmony is so broken that their immediate instinct is to protect themselves by throwing someone else under the bus. This is the fall. It's not just the eating of the fruit, it's the whole sequence. To the doubt planted by the serpent, the choice to distrust God, the act of disobedience. The immediate onset of shame and fear, the hiding from God, the broken intimacy with each other, and the refusal to take responsibility. That one bite wasn't a small slip-up. It was a fundamental reorientation of the human heart away from God and toward the self, and it came with devastating consequences. The rest of the chapter lays out these consequences. They aren't random punishments, but rather the natural results of a world now disconnected from its life-giving source. The world is now operating under a curse, a state of brokenness. To the serpent, God says it will crawl on its belly and be hated. But he also gives a strange cryptic promise. He speaks of a future conflict between the serpent's offspring and the woman's offspring. He says the woman's offspring will crush the serpent's head, while the serpent will strike his heel. Early Christian thinkers saw this as the first hint of the gospel, a future rescuer, born of a woman, who would one day defeat the enemy, though he would be wounded in the process. To the woman, God says her pain in childbirth will be greatly increased. This isn't creating pain from nothing. It's taking something natural and good, bringing forth new life and twisting it with pain. He also says her desire will be for her husband, and he will rule over her. This speaks to a breakdown in the relationship between men and women. The perfect partnership of equals is now marred by conflict, struggle for control, and domination. It's a tragic description of the battle of the sexes that has played out through all of human history. To the man, God says the ground itself is now cursed because of him. Before, work was a joyful partnership with creation, tending a garden that produced freely. Now, work will be toil. It will be a fight against thorns and thistles. He will have to sweat and struggle just to get food from the ground. The work, a good thing, is now infected with frustration and futility, and this will continue until he returns to the ground from which he was taken. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. And here it is, the final fulfillment of the warning. Their death. Not just spiritual death, the separation from God they were already experiencing, but physical death. Their bodies would now decay and die. The connection to the eternal source of life was severed, and the process of entropy began in their very cells. Finally, they are banished from the garden. God drives them out. He places powerful angelic beings, cherubim, and a flaming sword to guard the way back to the tree of life. This wasn't just to be mean, it was a grim act of mercy. If they had stayed in the garden in their fallen, sinful state and eaten from the tree of life, they would have lived forever in that broken condition, trapped in a state of eternal rebellion, shame, and separation from God. Banishment from the garden sealed their fate as mortal beings, but it also left open the possibility of a future restoration, a rescue plan. So, did one bite of fruit ruin everything? In one sense, yes. Absolutely. Look at the world. It's filled with the very things that entered in that moment. Shame, fear, guilt. We hide parts of ourselves from each other and from God. And relationships between men and women are filled with conflict and misunderstanding. Our work is often a source of stress and toil, not joy. We struggle against nature, and nature struggles against us with disasters and disease. And every single human being, without exception, faces death. The story of the fall is an explanation for why things are the way they are. Why is there so much beauty in the world, yet also so much pain? Why do we long for connection, yet constantly mess up our relationships? Why do we have a sense of right and wrong, yet so often choose wrong? The Bible's answer is that we are living in a fallen world. We are the descendants of Adam and Eve, and we have inherited their condition. A nature that is bent towards self-interest, distrust of God, and rebellion. We are born outside the garden. The story isn't just about two people long ago. It's our story. Every day we are faced with the same choice. Do we trust God's definition of good? Or do we seize that knowledge for ourselves? Do we listen to his voice? Or do we listen to the serpent's whisper that we know better, that God is holding out on us? Every time we choose our own way over his, we are reenacting that moment at the tree. But in another more important sense, the answer is no. That one bite did not irreversibly ruin everything. It was a catastrophe, but it wasn't the end of the story. It was, in fact, the beginning of a much longer, more dramatic story. The story of redemption. The entire rest of the Bible is God's answer to the problem of the fall. It's the story of his relentless, loving pursuit of his rebellious, hiding children. He chooses a man named Abraham and promises to make a great nation from him, to bless the whole world through him. He rescues that nation, Israel, from slavery in Egypt. He gives them laws to show them what a life of trust looks like and to reveal how far they have fallen from it. He sends prophets to call them back when they wander away, constantly reminding them of his love and his promises. The whole story is building toward a final solution, a way to deal with the sin, the separation, and the death that entered the world in the garden. A way to reverse the curse. That first cryptic promise in the garden about the woman's offspring crushing the serpent's head finds its ultimate fulfillment in the person of Jesus Christ. The New Testament presents Jesus as the second Adam, where the first Adam was given a perfect world and chose disobedience, leading to death for all. Jesus, the second Adam, entered a broken, fallen world and chose perfect obedience, even obedience to the point of death on a cross. His death wasn't a tragedy, but a victory. It was the moment the serpent's head was crushed. He took the curse upon himself. He paid the penalty of death that we deserved for our rebellion. And his resurrection from the dead was the proof that death had been defeated. He was the way back to God. the way back to the tree of life. So, the story that begins with a tree in a garden ends with a tree on a hill. The first tree was a test of obedience, which humanity failed. The second tree, the cross, was an act of obedience by God himself, on our behalf, to rescue us from that failure. The fruit wasn't the point. It was an object. The point was the heart behind the choice to eat it. It was a choice born of distrust, pride, and the desire to be God. That choice fractured creation and sent humanity spiraling into a cycle of sin and death. It ruined the perfect world that was, but it didn't ruin God's plan. In a way that is hard to fully grasp, God took the worst event in human history and made it the setup for the greatest event in human history, his own act of rescue. The story doesn't end with the gates of Eden being closed. It ends with the Bible describing a new heaven and a new earth, a restored creation. In the middle of that new city is the tree of life, once again, accessible to all who have put their trust in the one who reversed the curse. So, was it all about a piece of fruit? No. It was about a relationship based on trust. And when that trust was broken, everything else broke with it. The ruin was real. The damage was catastrophic, but it wasn't final. The story of the fall is bleak. But it's only chapter 1 of a much larger story, and the rest of the story is about how God, in his incredible love, refused to let one bite be the final word.